Let's read this first story. You may have seen the viral clip. Senator Rand Paul, Dr. Senator Rand Paul, urges people to defy COVID mandates. They can't arrest all of us. That's a bold statement. He says, quote, "It's time for us to resist. They can't arrest all of us. They can't keep all of your kids home from school. We don't have to accept the mandates, lockdowns, and harmful policies of the petty tyrants and bureaucrats. We can simply say no, not again." Paul also threatened to hold up every bill with 2 amendments. If any school system tries to keep kids out of the classroom this fall, one, to defund them, and another, to allow parents the choice of where their money goes for their child's education, that should be law anyway. We should have school choice. But he says, there's a quote. "Children are falling behind in school and are being harmed physically and psychologically by the tactics that you have used to keep them from the classroom during the last year. We won't allow it again." Now, of course, there's already a bunch of people who are claiming that he's telling people to outright defy the CDC in general, which was the funniest thing I saw from that. They were like, Rand Paul says to defy the CDC. And I'm like, he specifically said the restrictions that he called anti-science. I don't think he said the entirety of the CDC. And that distinction is kind of important because the CDC does more than just talk about COVID, mind you. They talk about a lot of things. But, man, what should people do? I don't know. You live in the authoritarian hellscape. What do you think?
I do live in the authoritarian hellscape. And I got to be honest with you, I thought we had a shot. You know, I thought things were not going to quite get this bad. A lot of people in New York City are vaccinated. I think we have some rather high percentage of New Yorkers who are vaccinated. There are people who still don't want to get vaccinated. It's not because they haven't had access to it. So at this point, they are making their grown-up choice to undergo medical treatment or not. For some reason, this is not good enough for the leftist government. De Blasio has always been a disaster. He's been a disaster since the moment he was elected. He is not an intelligent man. He is not a good elected leader. He has absolutely no principles whatsoever. There's nothing worthwhile about him at all. But I did not think that he would literally throw the entire city under the bus just in order to, satisfy this weird idea that he has where everybody needs to just do what he says. So there's this idea, this vaccine passport. Cuomo created they actually call it the Excelsior Pass. You can download it on your phone. It will track your COVID test results. It will track your COVID vaccine. You can show it. And additionally, part of the idea with the Excelsior Pass is that if you show it to get into a sporting event or what have you, you also have to show, supposedly, your ID. This is what it says on the New York State website, so that they can prove that it's actually your pass. So now, in order to move about freely in the city where you live, you have to show your papers at various places.
ID.
Yeah, that's what it says on the website. Right. I don't know. I haven't used it. I won't, obviously. I'm never going to download something so the government can track me on my phone. I mean, we're probably already tracked, whatever, but I'm not going to voluntarily do that.
Well, this is interesting because it enters the public sphere as like, oh, but it's about you got your vaccine already. What's the big deal? Right. And you need your ID.
And then you need your ID. And then what's next?
That's racist.
Right. What's next? It's also racist, of course. As
it's
we
racist
know.
for 2 reasons. Asking for ID is racist.
Oh, yeah.
Democrats said so.
Voting.
Yeah.
And it is true in New York and especially many of the places, the black community is the least likely to be vaccinated among racial demographics.
Yeah, so that was something I was thinking about too, because de Blasio has paid lip service to the black community for a long time. Even last year when we had all of the BLM protests, and then you had I forget what they were called, but they were like the COVID tracker people, right? The like test and trace.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So New York had this like whole test and trace core. And if you tested positive for COVID, I don't know if they still do, but they would call you.
I remember
and
that.
track you down. And de Blasio and Cuomo, one of the things that they agreed on during the pandemic was that you are not allowed to ask someone if they have been to a protest when you are doing a track and trace thing for COVID.
Everything's a protest from now on.
So you're allowed to protest without having, and so then they said then all these reports came out that said BLM protests weren't super spreader events. You literally weren't allowed to ask people if they'd been to a protest.
Yeah.
Once they were tracked with COVID, you weren't allowed to ask them. So there's actually no way of knowing whether or not they were super spreader events or not.
I have a question for you. What percentage of residents of New York City do you think are vaccinated?
I think it's something like 60.
It is 55.6.
There you go.
So close. Yeah. It's that's half.
It's a plenty of an amount.
I think we're going to see more exodus from New York City.
I think so too. There were already like 400,000 really rich families that left during the pandemic. The New York City school system started out in 2020 with 1.1 million public school students, a nice, healthy number, robust school system. And I think we're in like the 800,000 area now.
Whoa. Is this the U.S. just being crushed, like on purpose?
Being what?
Crushed.
Is the U.S. being crushed on purpose?
Yeah.
Like by some other authoritarian type of situation?
Well, maybe not necessarily on purpose might go too far, but the policies being put in place are just destroying the country.
I think they are destroying the country. I think we have a real ethos problem. We've heard Joe Biden say over and over again that his job is to keep Americans safe. The president's job is not to keep Americans safe. The president's job is to, run the country the way that his constituents say, and
Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces
to
technically
do that and
safe.
Keep the country safe, perhaps, but not individuals. And it's not his job to do anything other than to protect our rights. And that's not what's going on. Our rights are not being protected when we're being treated as though we can't make decisions about our own medical care.
Yeah, it feels like everything being put into place, and I probably said this 50 million times by now, is just literally destroying the economy. And you have to ask, what is if we're doing the same thing we did last time and it didn't work last time? Why are we doing the same thing again? Like they're putting in policies that, according to NBC News, are going to hurt the job recitation and growth. And they're putting into place policies that will basically just drive people out of New York. And we did hear Bill de Blasio say he wanted to convert the abandoned buildings into public housing.
Right.
So maybe insofar as it goes with like de Blasio, on purpose isn't that far.
I think he does want to completely destroy the city. I don't think he has any vision at all or any understanding of what it is that New York is really about. The other issue, too, is a matter of enforcement. So we've seen, I think we were looking at videos earlier, in France, you see police going around to the restaurants being like, "Oh, let me see your documentation that permits you to be outside of your home. Make sure you've." What are we going to do in New York? Are the police going to be asked to do this?
Yes.
Because here's an issue with that. First of all, if the police aren't asked to do it, now you're asking just your basic guy at the bodega to start demanding things of patrons. I don't know about you guys. I get really testy when people ask me for stuff that they're not entitled to about my person, right? I was telling you guys earlier about an incident in Philadelphia that we don't need to get into. But if it's not your just basic McDonald's employee who gets to demand these things of you, your basic middle manager who then drunk on power is going to freak out at you and start calling you names. If the New York City Police Department is asked to do this, will they do it? You think they will do it?
Oh, absolutely.
I was talking to some guys at the NYPD that I met at some Black trans rights Lives Matter protests over the summer that were actually rather amusing. And I was talking to a guy who said that the NYPD, in fact, declined to enforce social distancing mandates. What happened was, it was early on, it was like May 2020, and they were being asked to enforce social distancing. They were going out into the communities where there was the most active COVID. So what were these communities? These were mostly minority communities. So they're wandering around like Fort Greene or whatever, like Crown Heights, wandering around like Bed-Stuy, looking for Black people and Latino people on their stoop having barbecues, and then telling them to go inside. So the guys I was talking to in the force, they were like, that was a really super bad look, that we were like breaking up. Here we are, we're told to be less enforcing of things in these communities. We had done stop and frisk, whatever else. They pulled back on that, and now they're supposed to tell them to all go inside. So they declined to enforce that. They declined to enforce the mask thing. If you go around, if you're on the New York City subway system, and you happen to spot a police officer, which is not super frequent these days, but if you happen to spot them, they're not wearing masks. Lots of other people are wearing masks. The NYPD declined to enforce this stuff. In fact, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a bar in Staten Island that was like very vocally opposed. So it was the state police that were enforcing that stuff because that's who Cuomo had control over.
Well, then the state police are going to come in and do it.
Do you think that the state police would end up with this?
This is the normal thing they do. They bring in outside cops because, if you're a cop in New York, you're worried that if the NYPD steps on toes of the locals, then you're not going to be able to go to restaurants. You're not going to be able to, you're going to get people throwing stuff at you. So it happened in with Attila's gym.
That's right.
In New Jersey. The local cops from that town showed up and said, "Have a nice day, everybody," and left.
Right.
So they brought in outside cops who came in and said, "Screw you," with a smile on their face and put the boot down,
Yeah, I wonder how that would go down. Hopefully nobody ever has to find out.
Look,
what a disaster. What a total
bar.
nightmare. They did it with the bar. They shut it down.
There was a bar in Staten Island, and the guy he wasn't even selling anything. He was like, it's just, I'll give it away for free, I guess. And then the state police came and stood in front of the building. I think they arrested the guy, right?
Yeah, they arrested him multiple times. And there was literally a bar like a block and a half away that was allowed to operate. And he wasn't.
Because they did like zones.
They did these stupid zones. Yeah,
there was a woman,
as though these zones are impossible. My son tells me about this. We'll go into a restaurant and then you don't have to take it before, and he'd be like, "Oh, well, that's right. Once we sit down, we can take our masks off because chairs are COVID blockers."
It's true. Yeah.
He's 11. He's 11, and he sees through this mess.
Yes.
This is the craziest thing. I love. There's a meme where it's like someone pulls up to a drive-through and they're being handed there's a tray holding the Wendy's bag. And then the person's like, "What's this?" And they're like, "It's your food." It's like, "Why is it on a tray?" And they were like, "For COVID." It's like, "Why can't you just hand me the bag?" Because we're trying to reduce contact. It's like, so you mean to tell me that you literally handled the meat, handled the bread, handled the lettuce, you put it all in the wrapper, put it all in the bag, you've touched it all already, and now you've put on a tray that you won't touch, so you're not touching the bag the one last time.
Right.
If anything, you've increased the amount of contact you've made by holding the tray. Just give me the food.
Early on at the Post Millennial, we were running a lot of stories like that because they were just so hysterical. And there was one with like a guy at Tim Hortons pushing out a coffee on a hockey stick, like balanced on a hockey stick.
That's really funny.
Oh, man.
It was like, that's not helping.
That's why I'm saying we are chickens in a chicken coop.
I
guess some of the chickens are like, hey, something's not right.
When you guys were earlier talking about state police coming in, it made me think of the Sheas Rebellion. Are you familiar with this rebellion? Right after the Confederate, basically after the United States did the 13 colonies?
Yeah.
What was it called? The
13 colonies.
Yeah, it was before they did the Declaration of Independence. They had like an original document that they were using.
Articles of Confederation.
Articles of Confederation.
Yeah,
and the states had too much control, and their own police wouldn't enforce. Like the Farmers' Rebellion wanted the courts shut down. The police were like, no, let them. These are our friends. We're not going to stop them. So they had to call in the state police. And then they were like, it's too dangerous to give so much power locally. We need to federalize. And in a way, they're right, because they were able to organize taxes and military, but the danger of that is now you can send in the feds.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.